Okay, everyone. Well, welcome to the monthly webinar for Cert 4 and Mental Health. Just get my images up here. So tonight we're going to be looking at the Provide Recovery Orientated Mental Health Services Unit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to go and click that one. And that one should, now you're getting my desktop, I'm getting a lovely photo of my kids. And if I can move this thing, I'll be able to, won't let me hit start because it's covered up by Zoom. Hold on. Slideshow from beginning. How's that? You guys can see the slideshow?
Yes.
Good. I can't see your faces in big smiling profile like I had before, but that's the compromise, I think. So yes, we're doing the Provide Recovery Oriented Mental Health Services. Now just quickly, because I can't remember off the top of my head, has anyone done this unit already?
No.
I'm doing it, Carly.
And half.
You have, Sharon? Okay. So that's fine. Feel free to jump in then. I mean, anyone can jump in, but yeah, that's fine.
I'm doing it currently.
Now, who's talking? Oh gosh, I can't see everyone's
Gautam.
face. Oh, Gautam, I can't see you talking
Yes.
because of your webcam. So I can't see everybody's face all at the same time. It doesn't let me for some reason.
Yeah.
Okay, you're doing it currently. Oh, well, that's perfect.
Yes,
then.
yes. Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. So, yes, I think I like this unit. I think it's quite interesting, and it's definitely very important. So this is one of the ones that's really important to understand for. So the Certificate for Mental Health, it became like a brand new version about 2 years ago. And the major change from how it was to how it is now is this focus on recovery. So it's really important to actually understand who, like how we frame recovery, what that looks like. Okay. So I think, there we go. So what is mental health recovery? I'd love to hear from you guys what it means, how you understand it. Yeah, there's no wrong answers. It's just, yeah, what does recovery mean for you guys?
The consumer taking responsibility for their own recovery, which means
their own journey. Yeah.
Their own journey.
Yeah. Taking responsibility. Yep. Why do you think that's important?
Yeah, that helps enhance their self-esteem, and they feel empowered.
And that the people can feel better.
Yep. And what might feeling better involve?
Improving their lives and doing achieve their goals that they want achieve, and yeah,
Finding a purpose.
I didn't hear that. I heard the improving their lives, and then I couldn't. Can you go a little bit closer to your microphone?
Yeah, and that they can achieve the goals of their plan of recovery.
Okay. Oh, they can achieve their recovery plan. Yep. And then was someone else talking after Hector?
Yeah, that finding a purpose and meaning in their life and deriving satisfaction
Yeah.
out of that.
Yeah. Finding
Despite,
purpose and meaning. Yeah.
I mean, despite relapse, they get this feeling of moving forward.
Despite what, sorry?
Despite the relapse, recurring relapse.
Yes, okay. I'll try my other earpiece. I'm getting bad audio tonight. Yes. So it's about living well with or without the symptoms. So this is a little bit of a strange. Not strange. It's a little bit of a difficult concept to understand because the word recovery can be a bit misleading. So what recovery means for one person, the lady who has no mental health issues, she gets pregnant, she has a baby, and then she has a bout of postnatal depression. And then after 12, 18 months, 2 years, maybe she's done some psychotherapy, some antidepressants or something like that. She then recovers and, well, not recovers, she actually recovers in the sense that she's now got no more symptoms. And that's like a situational depression. Is very, very different from someone who gets, say, a schizophrenia diagnosis, which is a lifelong condition. And so recovery for them isn't going to look so much like the voices in their head stopping, but it might look like finding the medication that helps reduce their symptoms and finding community connections and relationships, maybe working part-time or just having a hobby, some art that gives them meaning. And so recovery for them might look very, very different. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, Desiree.
You mean like it's a cure, right?
I really can't hear you. Go on.
Cure, like
a cure.
Yeah, like with the scenario or the example you said with the lady with the, I mean, who gave birth. What she get there is a recovery, but related to cure.
Yes, that's right. That you could say that you could. It's not the way that we normally talk about it, but I mean technically that's true. That in a sense she's been cured. We usually just call it like situational depression.
Okay.
So it was caused. There's a fancy terminology, exogenous depression.
Okay.
And that means caused by something outside of you. Whereas I think they just say endogenous. I think I'm getting the right word right. For something like schizophrenia, means it's not caused by something that's happening external. It's actually something that's happening inside of you. And so, in a sense, you could say it's a cure, but it's more just, it's a thing that has a distinct start and finish point. All right, well, this whole unit's on about this topic, so I'll keep moving along. So recovery is a personal journey. For some, it's a destination, so yes, free of symptoms, but for others, it's an ongoing journey. It's about living well rather than being free of symptoms. So it involves the development of new meaning and purpose in a person's life as they grow beyond the effects of mental illness. I think a really great example of this is you can pick it up from people in the language that they use. To, like, let's say the language they use points out their ego, like their ego identity. So like their self-perception. So a person that's not living well, you might hear in their language that like an over-identification with their illness. So instead of saying, you know, we say, oh, I have diabetes, or I have a headache. We don't, well, we do sometimes, but if you said my diabetes, that's got like a level of ownership that, I mean, yeah, we do talk about that, but generally people will just talk about, oh, I have diabetes, like I'm not that I am diabetes. But when we look at mental health, we often see in people's language that they use, they have this lot more ownership. So they'll talk about my depression or my anxiety, and you get this feeling that there's almost like they've incorporated into who they are as a person. So that's not necessarily entirely bad, but you know, looking at recovery and living well, it's to grow beyond that. So yes, you might be someone who has schizophrenia or anxiety or bipolar, but you're not your illness. You're not your bipolar. You're not. If you get that little nuance, I feel I explained it very well. But it's when we take too much ownership of these labels that they can sometimes become not helpful. And they can sometimes be the thing that actually stops us growing and moving forward. So I'm very passionate about people. Some people don't believe in diagnosis at all. I think it has its place. It's fine. It's appropriate. But we don't want to get wrapped up in that. We don't want to get too wrapped up in what they call the secondary payoff. We like having this illness because it's gaining things for us. Oh, when I'm depressed, people help me out. Or whatever. So looking at recovery, it's about, you know, we've got it here, you know, growing beyond the effects. And that's the symptoms, and that's also the effect on your sense of self, your sense of personhood. I am more than my illness. I should have got more water. I always drink so much when I'm doing this. It's person-centered, it's not illness-centered. So looking at the past, how we dealt with mental health, it was all about the illness. You can't separate the person from the illness because it's a illness of the mind. So we are, I mean, we get into philosophy, but we are our mind, you know, they're very interrelated there. So we're not there just to treat this person's symptoms. We're there to treat the whole person, or in our case, to support the whole person. I wouldn't say we're providing treatment, but yes. And it's strengths-based, not deficit-based. Does someone want to give us a quick reminder on what strengths-based is as opposed to deficit-based?
It's like to tell the person what strength they have. Yeah, so they would know their advantage, and they will be confident.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's to tell the person their strengths, to remind them of their strengths. Because you know, most people that are living with mental illness are going to focus on the difficulties. They're going to focus on what they don't have, what they can't do. I was only doing this yesterday with another student that I was working with, who will remain anonymous, but I can just mention that, you know, they were struggling with some of the feedback from one of their assignments, and it was just not the situation, and their personality were not a good match. And so they kept getting caught up in, oh, I can't do this, and I'm no good at this. And I was like, and they had their work there to, you know, really trying to emphasize, but these are your strengths. You are good at these things. These are some practical ways that you can implement your strengths and the things that you're good at. It's very powerful because, you know, who doesn't like hearing about their skills and their strengths? It helps people to reframe and shift their perspective in the moment, in real time. So the point of recovery, I just like this quote, isn't to live without ups and downs. It's learning how to live with the ups and downs. So what this is about, it's about being able to sit and experience all of life. So we think of something like a person that's got PTSD, they've got, you know, they've experienced severe trauma and that kind of thing in their life. Well, you tell me, what does someone who's got PTSD or high anxiety do in a maladaptive, in an unhelpful way? What are some of the coping mechanisms that they might use? Someone with severe anxiety or PTSD.
Avoiding situations.
Sorry, you both talked. Do you want to go, Jess, and then we'll hear from Sharon?
They might avoid certain situations.
Yeah. Yep. Avoid. How might they avoid situations?
Like, say, crowded places might trigger them. So if they just avoid going shopping or avoid social events or catching the bus, things like that.
Yep. Great. Were you going to say something, Sharon?
Yeah, some may decide to involve themselves with taking drugs, so that maybe if it's the anxious about being in a social environment, the drug can help them get self-esteem. Yep.
Yep. Taking drugs. Yep. Brilliant. Yeah, there's some of the main things I was thinking of. Oh gosh, I can't remember exactly. There's been some studies around drug use and that kind of thing, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but you know, all, if not almost all, if not all people that are using drugs, or, you know, not using drugs, but that have a problem with drugs, where it's a substance issue, where there's an issue with the substance, they almost always have a trauma background. Lots of people can use drugs, and you may not know this, but they can even use quite, you know, the bad drugs that are considered very addictive and not get addicted. Like, people can use heroin once and not be addicted. There's usually an emotional component to why they're getting hooked. As Jess was saying, they're usually running away from something. And so a lot of our role when we're working with clients, we think like that people in a mental health situation, you tend to have the two extremes. So you have the totally numbing out, and that's what we're talking about. They're going to physically avoid places to avoid experiencing the difficult things, and they're going to try and numb. Gosh, you can eat chocolate, you can be addicted to work, you can be addicted to sport, you can sleep all day. It's all the same thing, where you're using external things to numb out. And actually, another way of doing it doesn't have to be external. You know, you ever meet these people that are overly like positive, like they avoid difficulties by reframing everything into this positive light. That is another way of kind of maybe not numbing out, but essentially shutting themselves off from that experience. So what this quote gets to is really at the heart of a lot of what we're doing. We're getting alongside people and we're helping them to realize that you shouldn't have extreme ups and extreme downs, but you also shouldn't be numbed out. There is a natural wave evolution of like, emotional regulation doesn't mean being totally stable all the time. It's about finding a balance between going too extreme in either direction. That makes sense? I feel like I'm not making as much sense as I am in my head tonight. So yeah, that's just helping people regulate, getting alongside of them, supporting them, and actually helping them realize that you know, everybody experiences ups and downs. So the pieces needed to support a person's recovery: two-way sharing of information, recovery planning. The process should be collaborative. Implementation of recovery plan. The implementation of the recovery plan is to be collaborative as well. It's important to develop and maintain relationships. I'm going to talk through these in a minute. In a care network, support the person during their challenges, and regularly review recovery plan in a collaborative manner. So we sort of touched on at the beginning, you know, why it should be collaborative. We already said that it empowers the client and makes them feel involved, and more so, they just have a right to be involved. It's their life. But if you take it a level deeper, and this is sort of, I'm sort of pulling more from a counselling perspective. In counselling, and this is actually a change in counselling that's been really positive. We acknowledge that the person, the client, actually knows themselves better than anyone else can know them. And I mean, this comes through in the mental health course as well. So if a person comes up with, so if a person has an issue, and for you it's very clear what the solution is, and you go and tell them what that solution is, whilst it may be true and correct, the likelihood that they're going to make the changes to implement that solution is quite small. But if you come from a perspective where, yeah, this person I'm working with, you know, it's easy to see, oh, they've got all these things going against them. You know, what do they know? Or not in a negative way, but gosh, there's so many things. You actually start to go, well, it is their life. And I actually believe inside of this person are the answers and the tools they need. And if we're support workers or whatever mental health role we have, we're actually getting alongside them and helping bring out those answers. No different to what I'm doing with you guys here. You know, I can tell you, but it's always going to be better if I ask you and it comes out from yourself. It's going to land. You're going to go, oh, I remember that. Then you're just going to get better outcomes. So they have a right to be involved, but also it's just going to go better for them. Why do you think the implementation of a recovery plan, so not just the planning of it, but the implementation, why do you think that needs to be collaborative? Awesome.
Person can give better information about himself and his condition.
Better information. Say that again.
Yeah, the person involved can give the best information about himself and his condition.
They can. And they can give the best information in real time about how the plan's working. So they might be involved in making the plan, and you guys might all agree it's a good way to do it. But it's not until you actually implement the plan that you can find out, oh, we thought this would be a really good way to approach this, but my experience of the way that we've going about this is it's not actually helping me. It's not actually working for me. And then why do you think, you guys all familiar with the idea of the care network? We haven't really talked about that, but you know, a person's care network, and this is once again the model that we're moving more toward, well, we've moved towards now for a while, is in times gone past, people would be institutionalized. And the idea of a care network wasn't really on the radar. So a care network is that group of systems, people, resources that exist around a person. So I'm really happy that, you know, we're acknowledging that humans exist within a complex network of relationships. And one of the biggest issues with people that are living with mental health issues is that they're very, very isolated. Very, very isolated. So I don't know about your guys' situations, but I would assume for most of you, if you ran out of money, or your car broke down and you're stuck on the side of the road, or you have, you know, something go wrong at work and you kind of come home, you have a panic attack and you're really anxious, you've got some people, someone that you can actually ring on the phone, whether it be to borrow that money, or, you know, most people have some family or school, you know, but often with the clients that we'll come across, they just don't have those networks. And so what we help, one of the main things we do and we support them to do is to actually set up a network for them. So some of those might be professionals. So where we personally might have, and the ideal is to have friends and family that can help out for free, that's not always the case, and that's where we as a support worker can come in, psychologists, depending on their situation, maybe they've got an occupational therapist or a physio, maybe they go to an art therapy class. Just want to watch the time here. Maybe they go to an art therapy class, maybe they have, well, you tell me, have you got other ideas about things and people that could be part of a person's care network? Jess?
Like mothers groups could be a care
Mothers
network
group.
for new moms, or like AA meetings for.
Yeah, mothers group, and that makes me think of mothers groups online as well. Doesn't have to be in person. AA, yeah. Have you guys heard of Grow groups? So they're groups that are out in the community that function similar to AA, but it's for people with mental health issues. Sporting teams, sporting groups. It doesn't have to be specific mental health. So why do you guys think that developing and maintaining relationships in a care network is important?
Hey, Daniel?
Yes.
Sorry, can you repeat again the name of that group?
It's called GROW, G-R-O-W. And I can't remember what it stands for, but it's an acronym.
Is just here in Adelaide, South Australia, or is in all Australia? Do you know?
It's definitely in Adelaide, but I think it might be Australia-wide.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Oh yeah, I found it. Thank you so much.
No worries. Yeah, so why do you guys think that developing and maintaining relationships are important in a, with a care network?
Yeah, it's important so the people could be involved in the community. Mentally health person could be involved in the community, and they need to be, yeah.
Get them involved in the community. And why do you think that would be a positive thing?
Because we were born to be social, to interact with other people, to have a sense of belonging, acceptance.
Yep, longing, acceptance.
And support.
Support. Yep.
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
when you have.
I'm getting really choppy audio from some of you guys. I don't know why. Support. Yep. The key point on the back of that I'm sort of trying to get to is offers support, because ultimately we want to set up a situation, it may not be possible, where the person can actually maintain living well without being reliant on services. Because slightly cynical view, funding changes and there's not always services available. But also because no matter how good we are as support workers, there's nothing that can quite replace authentic, genuine family relationships, friendships. If a person's really having a crisis, they're not going to call a support worker at 2 a.m. because we're not there, we're not working. But if they've got people, and that's when a lot of people struggle in the early hours of the morning. And so, oh gosh, can you guys hear that? Kids in the background. They're all on their way to bed. And so the more that we can have them, the more that we can do ourselves out of the job, the better. Now, obviously, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a blend of support workers and professionals with informal stuff. But yeah, I suppose the point I'm wanting to make is don't underestimate the role that informal and unprofessional people can actually have. 100 years ago, and in a lot of the cultures you guys come from, we don't have professional mental health people. The society was able to deal with it. Rituals and cultures that provided support, provided, I'm just going to mute you, Jess, provided support and, looked after one another. There was a stronger sense of community. So why is it important that information flows two ways? From us to the client and from the client to us?
That we can know if they are having a problem or an issue, how they are feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Know if they're having a problem and how they're feeling. Mm-hmm.
And also we should share information about their rights, also their responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, making sure their rights are being met. But yes, also making sure they're carrying their own weight. This is a thing that you're going to struggle with all the way through. You've got a client, you're there supporting them, and trying to determine the balance between, okay, I haven't seen this person in a week or two, and we agreed to do this thing. Well, we agreed I will do this and you will do that. Maybe we agreed that they will make an appointment to go to TAFE and have an initial meeting with someone there about the course they want to study. You come back, you see them 2 weeks later. How was your meeting? Oh, I haven't done it. And so trying to determine when the person's being lazy or not taking responsibility or ownership versus we've actually got some real genuine barriers here for why this person hasn't gone there. Oh, they've not gone there because they've got social anxiety, and that's really intimidating to actually go to a meeting all on their own, or they haven't got a car, or they've had to spend their petrol money on groceries that week, or their child was sick, so they, and so trying to work in a way that's not judgmental and supportive, but we're all usually in this because we're compassionate, and it's important to get the balance there of actually, I don't know, maybe this person's making excuses out of fear, or they're making, and they're not really taking full ownership. And we want to be careful about that because we don't want to jump in and start trying to rescue people. Have you guys, well, I'm going to put this to you actually. What's the difference between supporting someone and rescuing them?
When you're supporting someone, this person has an input in what is going on. But when you're rescuing someone, it's like you are doing everything. Well, I'm guessing. You are doing everything, and it's like the person is just there, and you are there picking him up or picking her up and doing everything. But with support, this person, if it's a mental illness issue, the person is able to tell you, okay, I'm okay to do this, and you say, okay, there's a couple of ideas we can talk about and see how you feel about that. Yeah,
I love it. It's a really good answer. Yeah, you're doing everything, or I like to think of it as you're actually taking on the responsibility. So taking on the responsibility for their I said many years ago, I started to say to myself and to others, I don't want to be more committed to someone else's healing, or in this context, we're using the word recovery, than what they are. This is something you're going to find, and it's something to wrestle with. And I was only talking about who's going to be my new boss in my mental health role, that the lady there, that, you know, you have clients that are eligible for funding, and so they're getting services, and you're in there and you're like, oh, I'm going to come in and I'm going to help people with their recovery, and we're going to get their goals, we're going to do all these things, and you actually start to realize they just want you to take them shopping, and they don't really actually want to deal with their issues, or they're not ready to deal with their issues. And the impulse then can be to try and get over invested and try and rescue people. So on the back of the question, why is it important that information flows two ways? It's important to hear from them to be able to gauge where they're at, to be able to gauge how we're supporting and what direction we're going in. You know, I know I have a counselling qualification, and I'm still studying counselling, and I have to be really careful to not try and rescue people, to not try and go into all my elaborate strategies and plans. It's like we've got to go at the pace of the client, and if they're not ready, then we can, you know, gently encourage them and support them. But if you want a surefire way to burn yourself out, start trying to rescue people and take on their problems. People that aren't prepared yet or able yet to take on the problems themselves. Yeah, Jess, I'll unmute you. Go.
Does it discourage you as a counsellor or a helper when people aren't ready or are lazy, if that makes sense, when they're not ready to make any steps to help themselves? Does it?
It's a really good question. The honest answer is yeah. Yep, it's tricky. So I've been working in youth work lately. So these are young people that have been taken away from their parents for whatever reason. Almost all of them have severe trauma. I'm there to support them and to help them. And in many cases, they've got all sorts of behavioral and mental health issues, but they're like a forced client. It's a very different situation than someone coming to you to do one-on-one counseling. You know, they pay $100 or whatever it is and come for an hour, and they're like, yep, I'm here to do my work. And that's going to be the challenge, because in a mental health support work context where it will feel like people are employing you to be there because they've got their mental health funding and they're picking to have someone come to their place, it's very easy to think, oh, well, they want me here and they're ready to go. They want to live well and achieve all these goals and, you know, whatever their dreams are. And then you get there and you realize no, this person's quite committed to their addictions, or they're quite committed to, I was talking about secondary payoff. You know, I'm actually doing an online course at the moment, and we're talking about doing healing with people, and, you know, we get something out of being sick. We get something out of being unwell. You know, there's a pattern that comes up for people where they feel a bit neglected by their parents, probably often their mother, but they know that if they get sick, they get a cold, then their mother will be there, and then their mother will care. And so it's not actually in their interest to move through and move forward and move past these things, because there's a secondary payoff. They're gaining something. It might not be ideal, but they're gaining something. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, it can be quite discouraging. Yeah.
So does then that after time affect the way you approach new clients, or is every client a fresh page for you?
It's a good question. For me, it's a hard question to answer because I work with such a wide variety of clients. I do have particular interest in working people that want to do the self-development, and we're kind of getting off topic now. But, you know, I'm pretty good at going in fresh. But it's just a matter of being able to judge where you're up to, where they are. I'm still optimistic that I can learn tools that help people to be convinced, you know, to take more responsibility and ownership for their life. And maybe just being there as a support worker is enough, taking a strength-based approach to make them feel, all right, I've got the confidence now to, you know, to go away from using drugs and alcohol to numb my pain, to actually start to try and move forward and take ownership. We talk about this all day, but yes, hopefully that. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that to you guys as awareness, you know, because sometimes we go in very gung-ho, we think we're going to change the world, and then people go out as quick as they go in. You know, like even now, like I'm talking about the NDIS, a lot of the clients aren't going to have enough funding and enough funding to be able to get the support they need. They might only have 6 hours a week with a support worker. They might have some really severe and complex issues. So, you know, we do our best, we do what we can. And we have to realize that we're only one piece of the puzzle. So this is more in two-way sharing of information. How are we going with time here? The way in which we work must respect the person's experience, their culture, and their unique recovery journey, which is what we're talking about. Some people are ready to go, and some people have, you know, more barriers than others. So this requires a collaborative approach. Before proceeding, consent must be gained from client in accordance with organisational policies and procedures. I'm not going to go into that because I think that's covered, you know, through a lot of the units and assessments. Gaining consent includes explaining relevant organisations' policies and that you're required to keep records. So that's important to know, to let the clients be aware that, you know, whatever you're talking about and stuff, you will be keeping case notes. Yes, they're confidential, but there is some case notes being kept. So how do you think that you could go about respecting a person's experience, culture, and recovery journey? Maybe we'll hear from someone I haven't heard from yet. You want to jump in, Elizabeth? Am I putting you on the spot? Someone else? You don't have to. I can unmute you, but.
I would.
I've unmuted you now. You there, Elizabeth?
Yes, I'm there. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Can I repeat the question?
Yes.
Sure thing. So it's actually just the line, the top line is where I'm looking at. So I'm just saying, you know, how can we as workers respect a person's experience, culture, and journey, recovery journey? Like, you don't have to talk about all three, but, you know, how can we respect that?
By realizing like we are all different and we have different cultures, and we all heal different. We can't recover at the same pace.
We all feel different and
we can't recover at the same pace. Some do recover.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We can't recover at the same pace. Yep. Yep. I'm just going to attempt to change my speaker because every time you guys talk, I hear it very loud, like very fuzzy. Hold on. I think it'll be this one. Can someone say something? Oh, no, I've already heard it. It's not coming out, that one. All right, can someone say, is anyone just say testing for me or something?
Hello.
Oh, that was very clear, but it's still coming through my headphones. Anyway, we'll keep going. Some reason when you guys talk, it's like very, very crackly. Yeah, no, that was a great answer. Thanks, Elizabeth. I thought I wanted to ask something else here. No, I think that's better. Oh, yes. So can two-way sharing of information continued? Here's a question for you guys. Explain the limits of confidentiality. What are the limits of confidentiality?
When someone's at risk of harm or harming someone else, you have to inform someone outside of your confidentiality.
Yep, spot on. Which is good to let them know this when you first start working with them, because if someone starts disclosing stuff and then at that point you say, oh, you've just told me about this stuff that you're going to go home and take a bottle of pills and take your own life, I'm going to have to do something about this. It's not going to go over very well. People, if you're good at your job and you've got a rapport and a connection with people, they'll forget that you're a worker and they'll potentially start disclosing stuff in a way that they just would for their friends. So if you then come over and say, well, I actually have to tell someone about this, you're going to do some damage to that relationship and that rapport. So exactly what Jess said. If they're going to harm themselves or they're going to be a harm to others, especially if there's indication that there's harm to a child that's happening, then you need to report that. And there's a whole, I'm not going to go into that, but there's a lot more to it. But yes, that sums it up really nicely. And you want to let them know at the beginning when you're working with them. And then together identify barriers to the person's recovery. So what barriers, or what are some of the barriers, I want to spend a little bit of time on this. What are some of the barriers that a person may be facing? And I've sort of talked about bits and pieces tonight already, but what barriers might they be facing to recovery? I want to do a bit of a brainstorm and see if we can just list out a whole bunch.
Communication.
Communication. In what way? In what aspect?
Maybe the consumer is unable to understand or interpret his condition properly.
Communication. That's almost like communication and understanding. Yeah.
Lack of acceptance.
Lack of acceptance, did you say?
Yeah, like they don't accept or they don't really think like they are sick.
Yeah. It's a really good one. It's a really, really good one. Yeah. What person wants to get up in the morning and say, oh, I'm a person that has you know, whatever, borderline personality disorder. Very hard to accept. Lack of acceptance. Yeah, what other barriers? I heard something. Was that Hector?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Feeling of
I can't quite hear someone saying something.
the feeling of not feeling worthwhile in the for the life. You don't feel like you were the living.
You don't feel like you want to live?
Yeah, you feel like you are nothing. You don't value yourself.
Low self-esteem, not valuing themselves. Yep, that's big. I'm losing the language. I'm trying to say, you know, I'm not worthy of recovering. I'm not important enough. I'm just a, you know, I'm just a piece of crap, and you know, I don't deserve it. I'm a bad person. Yep. Alice, what do you think? Barriers to person recovering or recovery?
Yeah, some people may have some mental illnesses and they couldn't control themselves.
So a barrier might simply be that their trauma is so bad that they keep getting triggered, and it's sort of like happening unconsciously.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, that's been a real issue with some of my clients that have been trying to self-regulate, like youth work clients. The trauma is so deep that they're getting triggered at an unconscious level and they don't know why. I mean, I had a kid honestly, I had a client about a month ago that I worked with. He lost $100. He'd worked and he'd earned $100 for the week. And I was in it was a big house. I was in the office, and I came out to see and hear him going off. He was swearing. He was carrying on. He was aggressive. He'd thrown a beer bottle against the wall, and there was beer running down the wall. He kicked over the rubbish bins. He was very, very aggressive to me. He was saying, I've had my money's gone, and he thought someone had stolen it. He smashed the window in his bedroom. He got very close to assaulting me. He didn't. And a whole bunch of things. I don't need to go into every specific detail. He was very, very angry. I had to call the police. The police came out. The police talked to him. The police weren't here very long. He very quickly calmed down. And after that, never met a more friendly, apologetic, and just remorseful and sorry client. I don't actually reckon I've met a client that got so aggressive and angry either. His trauma was triggered. He came from a domestic violence background, and he could not control himself. He could not control himself. He's a lovely kid, and he was actually trying. And after, he spent the whole night apologizing and saying, I'm so sorry, and in the moment, he was blaming it all on me and all on the others. But after, he said, it's my fault. It's not your guys' fault. I'm really sorry. That's quite an extreme example, but this is the kind of thing that we come across in mental health. When there's unconscious things, are you guys aware that they reckon about 95% of our brain is unconscious? Very little is actually happening at the conscious level. When that gets triggered, very, very hard to depending on what it is, control our thoughts, our actions. Yeah, good example. What else? Barriers.
Yeah, and also probably social barriers like stigma. Like
Stigma is a big one.
the people think that because people with mental health illness, they are dangerous or they have negative thoughts about them.
Yeah, it can be stigma that people in society don't understand it and discriminate, and it can be also like internalized. I don't know if the word stigma, but you know, internalized discrimination and stuff as well. What else? I'm going to ask this a few more times. They don't do big complex reasons, but just what even little things. What are other barriers that people may face to recovery?
Some people may have little knowledge about their illness, and yeah, so they may feel very bad about themselves.
Yep, probably a lot of people.
Yeah.
Might have a very low amount of knowledge about their illness, or even just self-knowledge in general. On a thinking more practically, just on a really practical, concrete level, what other kind of things could be barriers? Jess?
Maybe finance.
The lack of.
Sorry, I saw Jess's hand go up. Did you say something to Gautam?
Yep, I said financial condition sometimes.
Yep, that was actually one of the ones I was thinking of. I'll come back to you, Jess. What you want to elaborate a bit on that? What that might be about? Gautam?
Perhaps unable to access some training or some awareness sessions in order to optimally avail the support available.
Yep. I have a podcast that I love to listen to, and one of the guys on there has discovered not that long ago that he's autistic. He's a very high functioning autistic man. Anyway, throughout the podcast, he's been, he's quite honest about his own story, and he's started to see a psychologist for trauma treatment. This guy's in America, but it's like $240 a session, an hour that he's paying. He's getting really good results. But how many of us has $240 we can pay every session? I mean, I know for him, he talks about it being a stretch, but he has the capacity to do it. But if you're living on Centrelink, that'll be an entire week's payment. So yeah, financial issues, big thing. It's accessing treatment. It may be not having the money to actually get to treat. There might be free services they can access, but they can't actually afford to get there. Yep. Jess, did you want to say something else?
I was going to say lack of support network and transport and resources, which is basically covered by the financial side. Yes.
Yeah. No, that's the one main big thing I was thinking of, that we often think, oh, they don't understand their illness and they're going to get triggered. But actually, for a lot of our people, they have multiple disadvantage, And the other one actually is, they might have clinical depression. But the likelihood that they have a mother, an auntie, an uncle, a child who's also got mental health issues, or even just severe like physical issues, it always comes in clusters. We're often, not always, but often comes in clusters that we're never dealing with just the one person and the one situation. It's like, well, I can't come to treatment today because my daughter is being admitted to hospital, and sadly these people exist within, well, it's good they exist within networks, but sometimes they're existing in networks where there's all sorts of disadvantage. It's one thing to have a person who's middle class, upwardly mobile, has a good income, and has a diagnosis of depression or whatever. You're dealing with them It's another thing if you're working with someone in our kind of context who's accessing the service for free. They're usually going to be in a lower income bracket. You get what I'm saying, and there's just going to be multiple layers of needs, and that's another thing that can trigger this desire to rescue and fix. And actually, it's great to stay like, this is my client, and supporting them could involve hearing them talk about their family and stuff. And yes, you can give them referrals to other resources and services, but it's good to keep things in perspective, what we can do and who the client is, because some clients will be notoriously talking about other people, and there might be situations that really pull at the heartstrings. Before we move on, anything else that anyone else wanted to say about barriers? I think we've done a good job. The point I was wanting to make is that sometimes very small things that can seem very small to us, may be insurmountable, may be absolutely massive. If you've got agoraphobia, which is when you have fear of leaving your house. So the way, I don't want to get too detailed here, but the way that anxiety around social anxiety and all that can work is that, I think it was Jess was saying before, you know, you got anxiety about something, so you avoid that place. That then grows, and then you've got anxiety about going to the shops. So you don't go to the shops, you just go to the local deli. But after a while, your anxiety develops to not wanting to go to the deli. And the more we avoid things, the more it kind of grows, almost like a, like mold or a virus. That's just how it works. And so you end up in this situation where you're too scared to leave your house. You're doing all your shopping online, and you can do everything online now, and you can have it all delivered to you. You got a client who's got agoraphobia, and you're like, well, I know this awesome social arts group. The people that attend are about the same age as my client. It's going to be perfect. You find the route, you find the bus. They've actually got enough money because they haven't been going out much, that they've got money in their bank. They can afford to get there. And then same sort of situation. Next week you go there and you're like, oh, how'd you like the group? Oh, I didn't go. Oh, why didn't you go? Oh, I'm scared to go on a bus. And that might be the reason. Or, you get the point. Micro things that seem like micro issues can get blown up really big. So a lot of our jobs as support workers can be breaking things down into very small steps. I'm kind of preaching to myself because I sometimes forget all the little steps that need to be overcome to see. And you can do that, over a year working with someone, you can gain some ground. But, in a week or two, you could get frustrated if you're expecting, too much. Does that make sense? Yeah, that kind of comes across. Not quite sure how many slides we've got left.
Yeah.
Here we go. What is a CARE network? I knew this came up later. So we've already talked about that and who might be included. Develop and maintain strong relationships in CARE network. Oh yes, so this is the other, we've got about, we'll see how we go, maybe another 15 minutes or so. This is really important. The people have a right to include or not include who they want in their CARE network. So, a person might say, I'm actually wanting to become independent, I'm wanting to grow as a person, and I'm not really wanting to include my parents. I've relied on them for too long. Now I've got this NDIS funding. Now I can actually afford to get my own support. Please don't include my parents, and please don't disclose information about my situation to them. And that is totally their right. And sometimes you'll find people don't want to include people who you feel like could be really valuable. That doesn't mean you can't open up dialogue with them, doesn't mean you can't, give them information why they might want to include these people, but at the end of the day, that's their choice. I've seen this a lot in disability. Find that people that are born with disabilities, there can often be like a codependent relationship that forms with the client and the parent, often the mother, but not always, where you've got this 50-year-old person who's living with their mother and getting cared for, and it's not only about the person with the disability, that once again we're back to secondary payoff. The mother has at this point gaining part of their identity, part of their sense of self from this, and I've seen a lot of time that it actually stops the person to be able to grow and develop to their full potential. You've probably all seen it, even with just parents with kids, like we all have the tendency to want to do things for our kids that they actually could do, that we can actually teach them, empower them to do. And so I've seen that a few times where the person with the disability doesn't really want to include their mother to the same extent, doesn't want her to have control of their money or whatever anymore, but they don't really know how to communicate that, and it can get quite complicated. So yeah, that's that point. Obtain consent to share information with other members of the care network. So this comes into it, don't assume. And of course, you're not allowed to disclose information unless they've given consent. Yeah, basically that it's their information, so they have the right of who knows it and doesn't know it. And then the last point here is just to consider the support needs of the family, carers, or friends in the care network. This is something we don't often think about. And this comes back to the fact that we're paid workers that are paid to be there. We're not going to have the same buy-in generally as family and friends and carers. And the more that we can do to equip and enable and empower these people in their community that are there with them, week in, week out, the more we can do ourselves out of a job and help the person to live well. So how would you guys see that we could essentially support people in their care network, family and friends and carers in their network? Some practical things you could do. Are you guys aware of services for carers? So there's a service called, it's called Carers SA. And carers that, like people that are actually caring, they're usually going to get a caring payment from Centrelink. I'm not quite sure of the criteria, but carers can actually go to Carers SA, or they could. I don't know if it's ongoing, but a while back, and they actually could get free massages. The people that were caring for loved ones in a role could come, and they had I don't know, I haven't been, but have a system set up where you can actually get a massage for free. So this is a kind of providing support for it's a respite type service, giving respite to the carers. So that's one example. What other types of things could we do?
I'd assume there'd be like counselling services provided to some carers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What
and there's
called.
Yeah, and of course you can just inform them or inform your client that they can go to the GP and get a mental health plan and access a psychologist or a counsellor that way. So yeah, what you're touching on there is passing on resources. Because you may or may not know, but once again, I can't remember the stats, but the statistics are very high for people that are caring for a loved one, that they themselves develop mental health issues over time, because often they're giving up paid employment to receive a very measly carer's payment. Very isolating, a lot of stress. Looking, you know, it might be a spouse, got a spouse with bipolar or something like that, and they're their carer. So we really need to support the network. I was just thinking of other things like free programs, free information sessions that we can pass on. There's always little talks and little sessions on mental health. What other things was I thinking about? You know, books, pamphlets. The client might not have the cognitive ability when they're really in a place where they've become unwell to understand. What we talked about, they might not understand their illness very well, but their loved ones might. They might be able to read a book or take a short course or attend a seminar or whatever. There's actually a lot of resources out there. Carers SA have some programs and stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to make you guys aware of that, because if you can support that network, you exponentially increase your impact. You know, if you work with a client, that's fine, but when you're out, you're gone, you're not there. But if through you can actually support, you know, the mother, the father, the uncle, the brother, to understand and start to understand the triggers for their loved one, start to know how to help the person self-regulate if they're having an anxiety attack, start to know seeing the signs when they're starting to get unwell so that they can actually access some early intervention strategies. It's pretty much limitless what you can, you know, what they can actually offer. You guys got any questions about any of that?
No.
No, all makes sense. I would like to know how many slides I've got left, and it's not telling me. Oh yeah, right at the end here. Okay, we just got 2 more slides from current slide. So yeah, develop and maintain strong relationships in care network continued. So always work from a strengths-based approach, respecting the client's rights. We've touched on that tonight. Confidentiality with intention to support clients. We'll maintain a sense of dignity. Oh yeah, so if you're maintaining their confidentiality and keeping them in the loop, it will maintain a sense of dignity. Really, really important. There's already enough shame and sense of self-loathing that happens when someone is struggling with you know, mental health issues. So ensuring that their dignity is maintained. Offer support and training. So this is what I was saying, training service to others in care network. And then note, a person's mental health is affected by the health of their relational networks. And that's also what I was saying. They often exist within systems that are struggling, systems that are unhealthy, you know. Their mental health's not good because they grew up with an abusive alcoholic father. Well, probably their siblings are also struggling if they grew up in the same household with the same kinds of situations. These are very systemic issues, and I think that's why it's good for us to keep in perspective what we can achieve 3 hours, 6 hours, even if you're there 15 hours a week. Not to be negative or cynical, but just to be realistic about what can be achieved. But at the same time, over a 3, 6, 9, 12 months, actually big changes can be made. I've heard some, yeah, I have heard and I continue to hear some really positive stories. Oh yeah, maintain an empathetic, supportive and hope-inspiring approach. This isn't about being fake and just smiling and being happy and trying to make everything good, but it's just about being a hopeful person in their life. And yeah, I think that speaks for itself. Not getting pulled in. It's easy to get pulled in by the client's narrative when they're really struggling. And then assist clients to see challenges as part of the journey. These challenges don't get the last word. No matter how bad you're feeling in that moment, you physiologically can't, like the body has a limited capacity to stay anxious. You physiologically can't remain anxious forever. Panic attacks can only last so long. The body can't keep releasing all the cortisol and adrenaline. We can add to it by adding what we sometimes refer to as like second fear, where we're fearful about the panic attacks, and you can extend it a bit. But ultimately, you can't stay in that space, you know. So, and it's not, I mean, it's not helpful to say to a client, well, it won't always be this way, but throughout, helping them to zoom out their perspective, because when we're anxious or stressed, we get very myopic. This is all we can see. There's nothing more to it. It's always going to be this way. I'm never going to, you know, and helping people to zoom out and even reflect on, oh, when was the last time you felt good or happy? Or, oh, you know, last week I went out shopping with my mum and I felt really good, and sort of pulling that stuff out of them. And then respond proactively to obstacles, challenges, and barriers as they arrive. And I think we've smashed to death the barriers that they might face. And so, yeah, just being proactive. And I think the last thing about that I'd say is don't be afraid to talk to your supervisor or a colleague. As long as you're maintaining confidentiality and you're only talking to people that are directly connected with this client, get a bit of input. Debrief it. I know for me it really gives perspective to think, well, I've been trying to do it this way and I'm thinking about it this way, and you know, what do you think? What's your perspective? So that's about all I have for you guys tonight. We've got about 5 minutes till 8:30. Are there any questions or comments or thoughts? Not so much about like assignments and stuff. Once we stop recording, I can answer questions about that if you need. But just, yeah, just about the content tonight. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Was it useful? Getting a nod. Nothing? That's fine. Doesn't have to be anything. So I'll give the opportunity. All right, so I'll stop the recording here.